Hello beautiful people and welcome to another video. This one is very exciting because I got another tea trolley. If you've been following my channel, you might remember that over a year ago I restored one of these. It was a bit different, and this one I didn't actually find it. One of my neighbors told me that it was outside and I just went to pick it up. As you can see, it was in a really rough shape. The top was gone. It was delaminated, one of the casters were gone, and the ones that were left, they were just in a really bad shape. It also happened that a friend of mine, David from MayfieldRestorations,
hi Jay's beautiful people,
was working on the project using his new toy from xTool, and because I just got a different one from xTool as well, we decided to see what kind of ideas we could come up with and how we could incorporate those lasers into furniture projects. So let me show you what I did, and I'm just gonna tell you right now that David threw everything, including the kitchen sink, at his project, and it's probably the best one he's ever done, and you will absolutely love it. As I looked at the tea trolley, I realized that there was some woodworm damage, so before I got to restoring it and doing anything, I just sprayed the whole thing with a woodworm treatment spray. This piece was completely loose, so I had to re-glue it. I cleaned out the area where the glue was and I applied fresh glue. I replaced the piece and I applied some pressure with a clamp and left it to dry. My idea for this project is to restore it, but to modernize it a little bit as well, because the top is missing, and I'm guessing it was pretty much just like the shelf underneath, but I'm not quite sure, so I'm just going to put my spin on it. And unfortunately, one of the wheels was missing, and this is not something that I could easily find to replace it, so I just took them all off. And by the way, the tool I'm using, this is for angle grinders, and it just was perfect for this application. Otherwise, it would have been quite difficult to take these casters off. But I do have a plan to replace them with different ones that might actually be even better. I think the neighborhood cats, they just sit around and just wait for me to get into my workshop. And as soon as I do, they just come and beg for snacks, because I barely started working on the tea trolley and there he was. I'm not sure what happened to the top, but I need to make a template to replace it. And because this tea trolley is not exactly straight in any direction, it's just much easier to make a template because the measurements are not the same on both ends. So now I'm basically just taking this template that I made and I'm gonna trace it onto a replacement piece of plywood and just cut it to shape. As simple as that. And just like that, I had a new top. The drawer was cracked on both sides, so I had to reglue it, and it was a bit tricky, but I was able to make enough space to squeeze some glue in, and it worked just fine. And because I got squeezed out when I was applying pressure with the clamps, I knew that the glue was actually between the pieces, so it was okay. One of the corners was damaged as well, so I used my router to basically make it flat and remove the portion that was damaged to replace it with a new piece of wood. And then I just roughly marked the size of the replacement piece, I cut it to size and I glued it in place. I clamped it down and I let it dry, and I also used some sawdust and glue to fix some of the woodworm damage that was in that same area. And now, time for my favorite thing, sanding. I also decided to take the bottom shelf out because it was in a rough condition. I tried to sand it and see whether I could actually make it look decent, but I just wasn't happy with it. The veneer was delaminating and it was just pretty rough, so I replaced it with a new piece of plywood. I came back the next morning and I started by finishing the repair. As I mentioned at the beginning, I wanted to modernize this tea trolley and I had an idea, but my plan seemed to be more complicated than it needed to be, so I was just trying to come up with a better solution. I also knew that I wanted a lot of brass on this project, and if you guys watch my videos, you know that I like brass, so I was very excited. Because of the repair, that was obviously a very thin line that was visible, but nothing that a little bit of wood glue and some sawdust cannot fix. When the glue on the drawer repair was dry, I sanded it all and I removed the handle because I didn't like it and I had a different plan for it. I sanded most of it, the bottom, the sides and all around it, other than the inside because it was actually in a decent condition, so I decided to restore it. And I was about to do it, but apparently it was a snack time for Rufus, so he came by to remind me about it. Hello there. And before you say anything, I do limit how much snacks I give him, because if it was up to Rufus, he could probably eat 3 packs of those. As I mentioned before, for the inside of the drawer, because it was in a decent condition, I decided to give it a good clean and use Restore a Finish to make it nice and shiny. I keep my old socks, clean ones, because they're perfect for this application. And look how shiny it is. And when I was done with that, I did some more sanding. As always, huge thank you to all of you generous and beautiful people for helping to keep the lights on at the shop and buying snacks for the cats. If you would like to support the channel, you can do so via Buy Me a Coffee, by hitting the Super Thanks button or visiting my Amazon wishlist link. I really appreciate it and thank you.
$2,000 later.
One of the support pieces for the top needed fixing, so I just made a new one and I glued it and screwed it in place. Remember how I said that I wanted a lot of brass on this project? This is one way I'm going to add it. I thought it would be really nice to add these brass trim pieces all around the top and the bottom shelf. It was basically designed asking for that, so I thought it would be nice. So I cut all of them to size and then I use 180 grit sandpaper to give all those pieces a nice and brushed finish. Even though I just bought all these pieces, they were tarnished and I had to do something to make them look a bit shinier. When I was done with all of them, I cleaned them with acetone to get them ready for a clear coat so they would keep the shine for longer. I left those pieces to dry and I used a tack cloth to remove all the dust from the trolley. So I've been thinking what I want to do about the color of this tea trolley, and I decided that I don't really want to stain it because I want to keep it as natural as possible, but I need it to be a bit darker because of what I'm gonna do with it. I want to use Odie's dark, but this is not going to make it dark enough, so I decided to add a little bit of dye. This is coffee color and this is for resin, but I tested it and it mixes well with this oil and it doesn't seem like it's going to separate, so I think it's gonna be fine. Well, I'll give it a go. So I'm going to mix a little bit of this in a separate container because all this oil is very expensive. I don't know how much I will actually use, but let's hope not more than this. I'll add 3 more. Yeah, there's a big difference. I got these pods and this one is 800 and I'm going to use this to apply the oil. I used it on my last project and it takes much longer than if you just use a piece of cloth, but I think it gives you much better finish. This oil is meant to make the wood darker with age, so this is not dark enough. I've added a bit more dye and I don't know if it's gonna make a big difference or not, but I'm just gonna go with this. There's a couple holes from woodworm, but I'll fix it when the oil is dry. I'll know exactly what color it is, so it will make it a bit easier. I don't hate this color because it's not yellow. It's It looks very natural, light brown. We'll see what it looks like when it's dry. I think it will be contrasting enough with what I want to do. So it's not super dark, but I think it's dark enough. And because this oil is meant to make the wood darker with time, so I think I'll leave it. And it should give me enough contrast between the brass and the wood color. But now I need to figure out what to do with the shelf and the top. And my idea for that is to use my new toy from xTool. This is a 40-watt diode laser, and it's very similar to P2 that I've used in the past, but this is not a CO2 laser. This is a regular diode laser, but it's quite powerful, and I really like that it's enclosed. It's got a really nice air assist. It's got the auto function, so it will switch off when you're not working. It's got the smoke extraction system, and what's really nice about this one is that it actually has fire detection. There are sensors over there. It's got those new cool clamps. They're magnetic, so you can attach whatever you're working with using those. And this one is a bit different from the P2 because it doesn't have cameras. It uses this to gauge the depth. So you basically set it where you want it because you've got the cross on. So that's more or less the center. And this will measure the depth or the thickness of the material. I've extended the extraction hose so it goes all the way outside. And this way I can actually work inside when this is on and doesn't bother me. You don't need eye protection because this is improved material and it just does it for you, so you can look at it. So I've got a couple of designs that I downloaded yesterday. Here are just some of them. I want something quite simple. Alright, so I've decided on the pattern, which has taken me forever. And this is pretty much what it is. It's a mid-century modern design. It's simple and I like it, and I think it's okay for a tabletop. I didn't want to do anything crazy. I decided to stain those shelves that I've made with walnut stain just to give them a bit more contrast against the brass and to make them look nicer. And I'll do the same with the bottom shelf, so they look the same. Alright, so here's my plan. I'm going to put tape all over the shelves to mark the center point and set the laser, and I'm gonna make a deep engraving so I can paint it, and then when I take the tape off it will give me a nice and clean design. I'm not nervous at all. I gotta hope I'm not gonna mess it up. So I'm just basically making sure that the laser knows the thickness. I'm just framing it to make sure it's actually where it needs to be, and it seems like it is. If you guys are interested in getting one of these machines, whichever it is, xTool is running a special deal for Halloween, and you can use my code for $200 off. It is in the middle. So as you can see, this is engraved, but it's a deep engraving because I wanted this to be deep enough so I can fill it in with something. And let's do that now. This was the first time I was using this paint, and if you actually do very thin coats and wait some time in between, it gives you a very similar effect to real gold leaf. It kind of looks dry and powdery. I didn't do it because I'm impatient, so it looked a bit wet, but when it dried, it actually looked very nice. You might be thinking right now, looks pretty nice, everything is going right, and I'm about to apply clear coat of some sort and it's all nice and peachy. Well, not quite. And fortunately I had a plan B and you'll see in a minute what happened. As I mentioned before, I did the same thing for the other shelf but a different pattern. I decided to do one on top and one on the bottom. Because why not? And because most of you guys voted for this one, I'll do this on the top. All right, let's go for it. I used some dowels and wood glue to plug the holes from the old casters, and I drilled pilot holes for the new ones. I replaced the manufacturer's label and I stamped on my logo. And this is what I decided to replace the old casters with. These are solid brass and they're super cute. And because there is never enough brass, I replaced the old wooden handle with a mid-century modern style brass one. I'm just going to apply a little bit of wax. I gave it some time and I wiped off any excess wax, and I used 2-part epoxy to attach all those brass pieces to the trolley. I repeated the process for all of those trim pieces. I clamped them in place and I let the epoxy cure, and the second shelf was ready. I did exactly the same thing as I did with the other shelf. I sprayed on the paint, removed the tape, and this is what the shelves looked like before I applied the clear coat. Because the shelves were a bit wobbly, I used double-sided tape to attach them to a straight piece of plywood and to elevate them a little bit, because I was about to apply epoxy which would make them stick to the substrate, and that was going to prevent it. Now the tricky part. So I wasn't sure what to do about it because this is obviously not flat And I wanted to make this easy to clean and maintain. So I wanted the surface to be flat. So I decided to cover it with resin. I need to do this at home because obviously for resin, the temperature needs to be quite high, otherwise it won't set. Potentially I can mess it all up right now. This is something that you can brush on, kind of like a clear coat. So you basically need to mix it until there is no smudges and it's clear. And it looks like it's pretty much ready. And to remove the bubbles, you can use a heat gun or a hairdryer or a torch. So for something like this, you don't need a form. You can basically just let it drip over the edges because it's just meant to work like a clear coat. So the layer is very, very thin. But again, I'm not an expert on resin. I don't know if you can see it, but it's not spread out. So I'm just trying to help it a little bit, but it should do it on its own. I'm just popping some bubbles with a heat gun. And guys, in case I mess it up, this is what it's supposed to look like. It's still wet, but this is the idea. Well, so I didn't really mess it up, but it was not perfect and there were some dimples in it, and I don't know why. It was meant to be self-leveling. I actually helped it with a brush, but it still just didn't look right. And to fix it, I had to get more epoxy, which I didn't have, and I didn't have the time to wait for it to cure, so I went with plan B, which was to basically make 2 more panels, and instead of paint I used gilding wax, which gave me much nicer color that matched the rest of the brass, and I used spray on lacquer instead of epoxy. And also this time around I made the engraving not as deep, so it just looked more flat. So this is the gilding wax, and this is the spray paint, and this actually matches the brass on the trolley much better, so I'm gonna redo this. And I'm not going to show you the whole thing again because it's, you know, pretty much the same process, but this is what it looked like and I was very happy with it. The color was better, I liked the finish, and yeah, cool. And this is pretty much what those panels looked like with the stain and lacquer on, and I was very happy with the way they turned out. At this point, the only thing left is to glue the panels in place and see what David managed to do and what he thinks about my project.
Hey Jay, just been looking at those pictures you sent me, and yet again another stunning piece of furniture, mate. Well done. I love the design, I love the graphics you've used, and you've taken what was a dull, boring piece of furniture into something really, really stylish, and yet again, mate, I love it. Well done.
I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have, like, comment and subscribe as always, because it helps the channel a lot. And I will link David's video in the description and in the end screens. And I honestly think this is his best project yet, and I absolutely love it, and I know you guys will as well. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next video.